Welcome everyone to Blogging Theology, and today I have back again Abdurahiim Roberts. You're most welcome back to Blogging Theology, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
And when we last spoke, you talked about your life as a convert to Islam. You're a British citizen living in Kuwait, and your experience of living in Kuwait as a British Muslim, and that was absolutely fascinating, to be honest. But today, very much like you to talk about a video that you made recently, where you spoke of your great love for Indonesia and its people.
Oh, yes.
And could you just perhaps tell us why you have such a passion for that country and its people?
Yeah, this is Bismillah. This is long story. I'll try my best to keep. Yeah, hopefully it won't get too long and arduous. But stop me if it does. So it all started when I left university. I wanted to be. So I studied electronic engineering in London, Greenwich actually. When I left university, I wanted to travel. Wanted to travel around the world, but I didn't want to be like one of those kind of surfer dudes or anything like that. I wanted to work and travel. So I was getting experience and seeing the world at the same time. But at the same time, I was pretty scared because I'd grown up in a, close to mum and dad, my family, and we'd mostly been, a very tight family unit growing up in, kind of suburban areas. And so I wasn't really exposed too much to too much ethnic diversity, I suppose you could say. So after going to university and meeting so many people in London, so many new people, different types of people from all sorts of different places. I mean, in London, as you can imagine, it's kind of a melting pot of every single possible country you can imagine. So I kind of got exposed to people out there and realized that, we're all the same, and everyone's got something to offer, and the different cultures and the fascination with them. So I think that's what kind of pushed me to want to travel. So I found myself, I would obviously say this is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I found a job with a company that was working in the oil and gas business, a service company, that they provide services to oil companies. And in this case, it was a company that provides what we call seismic surveys. So they had jobs all over the world, and it was in engineering. So I thought, excellent engineering job. I can travel and learn engineering skills. Everyone's a winner. So long story short, after a few jobs in Africa and Europe, I then traveled to Asia, to the Far East, and what they told me was, you're gonna be based in Indonesia, but first of all, I went out to Singapore and I did some jobs in Australia, in Singapore, in Thailand, and India, and Pakistan, and places like that. So as a young man, I was having the time of my life, seeing all these different places, and then a job came up in Indonesia, and they sent me out there. So initially, actually, I didn't have a very good experience, to be honest, because I went over to Irian Jaya, which is an island, a part of Borneo. You have Papua New Guinea and then Irian Jaya on the same island. And I went offshore there, and I got really, really sick. I think it was dysentery I had. And first time traveling really that far away from home, and I was really sick, and I felt terribly homesick. So my boss, I remember it was around about Christmas time of that year, and my boss sent me back, and he said, I need you back, it's too busy. So I didn't want to come back actually at that point, because I was missing home. But when I went back home, strangely enough, I went out with my friends who I'd grown up with in this small town I'd grown up in. And I remember my boss telling me this. He said, you will have a tough time explaining to people what you've just experienced, because they won't have experienced what you've experienced. So people won't get it. They won't understand what you've gone through. And he was absolutely right. And I found
before we come to that, can I just mention, for those of us in the West, the popular idea of a Muslim is an Arab from the Middle East. Okay, that's where Muslims come from, don't they? They come from Arab countries. But actually, the truth is that the biggest Muslim country on earth is Indonesia, with several hundred million Muslims living in this huge collection or group or nation of islands.
Archipelago is the typical word.
Sorry, that's the good word. Yes, thank you for correcting me. And that's and none of them. They're not Arabs, of course. They speak Indonesian. They don't speak Arabic as their first language. They're not ethnically Arab, I believe. And they weren't conquered by anyone. Well, they were conquered actually by the Dutch and the British and probably the French, but they weren't conquered by Muslims. They were converted, or they embraced Islam through meeting traders and Muslims who came to work and do business there. So it's a very natural, organic process, I understand. So I just wanted to establish that from the get-go, that the largest Muslim population on earth is not Arab, it's Indonesian, and their first language is not Arabic, it's Indonesian. And that really kind of changes the whole paradigm for us, doesn't it, as Westerners, when we think of Muslims, because for reasons I've just mentioned. So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to set the picture geopolitically there, that this is not just a country, it is the biggest country, a Muslim country in the world. It's like the fourth largest in the world anyway, of all countries, I think, isn't it? And it's not Arab, but anyway.
No, sorry. It's a very good contextual point, Paul, because when we hear about Muslims on the news, it's typically angry-looking people with turbans on and all that kind of thing. But people have to remember that there are millions, if not billions, of Muslims in the world that are not, from Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. Like you said, Java is the largest, as far as from the last time I checked, the largest populated Muslim island on the planet Earth. So yeah, that's a very good contextual point.
You were saying that you advise that your experiences would set you apart, really, in term from the people you knew back in Britain. You'd have experienced things that they would not understand, and I thought that was extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much. I don't mean that in any way in an arrogant way. I just mean I went back home thinking that it almost sounds like a cliche. I went back home thinking I was the same, but I was actually different, and then I found myself actually wanting to go back after I'd arrived home. Obviously, I love my friends, and of course, my mum, my dad, my sister. Love them dearly, and obviously, but I started yearning to go back after just a couple of days being there, and even it was over Christmas, which is culturally something which us Brits are nurtured to. To want to be in our home place and around our families and everything. So anyway, luckily I was able to go back, and that was when I really kind of embraced Indonesia. I was traveling around a lot, but I did get to see a lot of Indonesia. I was there for about, I'd say, 18 months initially.
Were you a Muslim at that stage? I can't remember.
No, so
this is the point. You're a British guy who is not a Muslim, experiencing this totally apparently new place, but you are not a Muslim. So I think you took your Shahada in Indonesia, though, didn't you? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, in a mosque in Jakarta called Sunda Kelapa. So for the Indonesian viewers who are from Jakarta, the Sunda Kelapa Masjid is where I took my Shahada, and I did that obviously before I got married, and then when that was done, I kind of had this feeling of happiness. I was going around telling people that I was working with, I became a Muslim. And then I went and got married a couple of days after that. And then we moved back to the UK, and both, myself and my wife, we, been yearning to go back ever since. So then, let's say this must be going back to about 2005. We moved to Indonesia, stayed there for a couple of years, and then I moved to Kuwait. So, and in between then, we used to travel back and forth for the summer holidays, so my wife could see her family, and we'd stay with them, and we'd travel around and try and go and see places like Bali, Surabaya.
But you say on your video that you had still have a great yearning to go back to Indonesia. So, as obviously now as a Muslim, but what is it about this country and its people that keep on drawing you back and back there?
It's hard to put into one or two words, but I was just thinking before this interview, how can I describe it? Well, it's like, I don't know if you have you ever visited Indonesia, Paul, or
Visiting where, sorry?
Have you ever visited Indonesia at all?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't visited any Muslim country. I'm going to go to Turkey probably in November, but that's my first step outside of the West.
I think whoever's watching this from Indonesia, you need to invite Paul to Indonesia and show him around, because let me give you an example. The airport that was called that's always been there since I was traveling there. They've only just recently, in the last couple of years, opened the new airport in Jakarta. So it's they call it Soekarno Hatta Airport. And when you get on the plane in Singapore or wherever it is you're traveling from, I used to travel from London to Singapore, Jakarta. When you get off the plane in Jakarta, it's a mixture of the humidity and various. I can't explain it. You get off and it hits you. It's kind of this. It's the smell of Indonesia, the fragrance of Indonesia. It used to hit you in that airport.
Fragrance of Indonesia.
And you used to walk out, and they'd have kind of these wooden carvings, and the airport had because it was part of such formative experiences in my life when I was growing up and started working. I think it's carved itself into my soul almost. So I was really sad when they moved the old airport to the new airport, because when you get off in the new airport, it's just like any airport. There's no
international
soul, but the old airport, man, it had a soul to it. And I don't know, that kind of you have to go there and see that, interact with the people. They're so they're so interested in you, and right. Especially if you're in an area where there's not that many expatriates. Like if you go outside of Jakarta to some of the towns outside, and people will be staring at you, and not from from being rude or anything, but they just want to know what's going on here. Who is this person? I want to talk to him. I want to, everyone's interested and and happy, and wants you to invite you into their house and know your life story. It's just it's a fascinating place. And then you've got the temperature, you've got the scenery. It's so green, the tropical rain, the tropical weather. And plus all of the experiences I had there, like I said, as I was in some pretty formative years of my life, and really good times. So I guess that's why.
You were saying that when the Adhan is mentioned, when the call to prayer is issued, the sense that the whole environment, the whole city, it resonates with this.
Yes. So it's not like in Indonesia, the various masajid or mosques they're not linked. I mean, the Adhan system is not linked. If you go to a place like Abu Dhabi, the Emirates, you'll find that it's linked. All of the mosques will give the Adhan at the same time. It's transmitted from one particular location in Jakarta or Indonesia or wherever you go there. If you stand outside, especially, for me, the most magical time is Maghrib time, the time as the sun sets. Why do I say that? Because this is when, if you're fasting Ramadan in Indonesia, this is when everyone's looking forward to it. But if you stand outside and listen to it, you'll hear the Adhan coming from every single angle, different voices, different. And it's that time when the sun's going down. It's kind of a magical experience.
Yeah, extraordinary. Gosh. So you spent a few years there. Now you're living in Kuwait. You're back in Kuwait. Is that right? Is that where you're based?
Yeah, back in Kuwait. Yeah, at the moment. But and of course with COVID, we haven't had the opportunity to travel back to Indonesia for a couple of years. So we're really, really missing.
Just to change the subject slightly. Well, I know Muslims in London and elsewhere here in the West, but there is talk about hijrah because of the way things are changing here in the West, becoming more difficult and restrictive to say certain things and believe certain things, which are believed by Muslims and people of other faiths, to be honest, traditional Christians and traditional Jews and so on, and even non-believers perhaps. But there is a sense that we are being regimented to believe in a strict set of beliefs now in the West, and if one doesn't adhere to them, one can be cancelled, or one can be attacked, one can be lose one's job, or worse. And it's becoming really nasty. And I know some Muslims in London, you have young children, they're concerned about the way their children have been, the kind of ideologies now that their children are being taught, without going into those issues in themselves. But there is this talk of hijra, which, if people don't know, is a sense of, if you Muslims leaving a land to seek, greener pastures elsewhere, shall we say? And is it something that Muslims, Western Muslims living in the West, should consider going to Indonesia? And I ask this also aware, at the same time, that there are Muslims in the Middle East and so on and elsewhere who want to come and live in the West. Economic reasons, to get a better standard of living, to further their careers, or escape their situations there. So there seems to be Muslims there and Muslims here wanting to, but specifically with Indonesia, I mean, because I understand in the past this might have been more of a realistic option, but are things changing now in Indonesia? Might this not be perhaps an option for people coming into the country now? What are your views on that?
So so if you want to move to Indonesia, I mean, you need obviously to have an income. So if you have some sort of a large amount of savings or something like that, I mean, it's quite, you can live quite cheaply out there. But then of course you need to consider the immigration concerns. What sort of a visa are you going to go? Obviously you need to be, you're going to be an expatriate there, so you need to have some sort of visa so that you're legally in Indonesia. If it's a tourist visa, I mean, I think you can go in, I think it's for up to 90 days, but then you have to, or you can go in for up to 60 days and then you can get it extended. I mean, you have to check the latest on embassy websites. Then you'd have to leave and come back again to get another visa. So, if you have the means to be able to do that, that's fine. But
for people with families who want to actually move from an increasingly hostile culture and ideology in the West to friendly Muslim country, nice Muslim countries, obviously like Indonesia, is this something that you would advise or advise against, or what would be the pros and cons, do you think?
Well, my position on hijrah is, I follow the opinion that it's something even compulsory to do if you're able to do it. I mean, that's just the opinion I follow. I'm not a scholar. I follow opinions, so I don't want anyone to come to me and say, Abdurahiim said, no, it's an opinion that I follow. So yes, I think it's advisable for people to make hijrah, and we know that hijrah is not easy. Hijrah is something which is in fact, one of the first hadith, or which appear in the front of many books, is the hadith of intention, innamal a'malu binniyat. If you read that hadith, verily actions are but by intentions, there's a reference. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ talks about making hijrah in that. If you make hijrah for the sake of Allah, then you'll get rewarded for that. But if you do it for another reason, I think it was reference to marrying a lady or something like that, then you'll be rewarded as to what you intended. So hijrah is something which is highly recommended to be in the land of the Muslims, somewhere where you can hear the call to prayer, somewhere where you can go and pray, you're able to practice your religion freely. And Indonesia is definitely one of those places, as is Kuwait, as is Saudi Arabia, as are many of the Muslim countries. So from a perspective of practicing your religion, yes, absolutely, you can do that. You can study. There are many, I know many scholars in Indonesia who I would personally recommend. It's probably not the place to do that here, but I do. If anyone wants to reach out, I can certainly do that. But the problem is, how do you make a living? Because what I've noticed as a trend in let's say recent decade, the last decade, is that countries are doing their best to try and ensure that the country nationals have jobs. There's a lot of these countries have huge unemployment, and
Right.
people wanting to get elected and so on and so forth. It's the same everywhere. We need to make sure that our people are taken care of first, and then, we can think about others. So, that's something you have to take into consideration. Excuse me. Yes. That's something you have to take into consideration. If you can find a job to move out there with, that would be obviously the first choice. You can try and start a business, but you'd need to have a partner, like an Indonesian partner, for example. That's also possible. I mean, making hijrah is tough. It's not something that's to be taken lightly. It's not just like a quick trip you do, and it's something really quite serious. And I have an Indonesian wife, so
right.
As I understand
so
it,
you could live in Indonesia, your wife. Yeah, you could live in Indonesia yourself, obviously, because your wife is a national.
Well, I believe that if with an Indonesian spouse, the spouse can sponsor her partner, or the husband can sponsor the wife if the wife is from another country. But I mean, I would highly recommend making hijrah, but it's not to be taken lightly. Planning needs to be there to make sure it's a success, and as much as possible. I mean, by all means, if people are planning that, you can always reach out to me, and I'll do my best to advise. I'm not in a position to help anyone, unfortunately, at the moment, any other way than giving advice, but can certainly do that.
That point, you're on Twitter and you're on YouTube, is that right?
Yeah, I've got Twitter, YouTube, TikTok.
What is your and TikTok? Of course, you got a huge following on TikTok. He's worth following on TikTok. But what is your Twitter handle and your YouTube account address?
My Twitter handle is it's a bit of a strange one. Source Catcher, SOURCECATCHER, Source Catcher. That's the same as my handle on Instagram as well. And on YouTube, I'm Abdurahiim with 2 I's Roberts.
As it is on the screen here, yeah. So,
Abdurahiim Roberts.
Not just because of the interest in people watching your work, looking at your work, but to contact you about any questions they may have about this subject or anything else. So, right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to be a bit picky and choosy with who you respond to, because some people just just want to kind of spam. But any genuine inquiries, I'll do my best to respond.
Well, that's very generous of you. Thank you for considering that. I also did mention that there are, I happen to know that there are Muslims living in the Muslim world who want to come to the West as well. But but actually, you mentioned that hadith in Bukhari, the first hadith, actually, where actions are judged by intentions, and I thought that really speaks to what we're talking about very powerfully, because if they're hijrah coming to the West, I only ever hear about it in terms of pursuing careers, jobs, standard of living. It's never for any other reason, as far as I can. Now, that's fine. I'm not saying they shouldn't pursue careers and have a better standard of living, of course. But hijrah, in the best Islamic sense, is not for that reason, is it? It's for, as you say, so you're part of the ummah, and you can hear the adhan, and you can send your children to schools where they will be taught properly, rather than imposed strange ideologies on them.
Yeah, well, I think I'm straying into dangerous territory here with regards to my memory, but and I'm sure the viewers will correct me here when and I'm, like I said, this is probably wrong. I'll paraphrase as best I can. Well, I'm sure there's a hadith that refers to whoever stays amongst the people a certain amount of time will become, as that will start taking on the characteristics. I mean, this is just psychology. If you live in an environment, I'll give you a simple example. Here in Kuwait, there's no shops that sell alcohol. I mean, I'm sure you can get alcohol if you really want, but I don't know where or how. I sometimes see news reports of people, getting arrested for making, stuff in their bathtub and stuff like that. But you can't buy it in the shops. No. And, so you never see it, you never come across it, you never smell it. So whenever I'm sitting on an airplane, I'm traveling and I'm sitting next to someone, and that person next to me decides to, I'll have a Heineken, or I'll have a Jack Daniels. The smell, Paul, I can't stomach it.
Wow.
I can't stomach it because I'm not used to it. So I've become used to not, alhamdulillah, being exposed to that kind of stuff. And when you do get exposed to it, it shocks you because So when you're living in an environment where it's all around you, even though you're not touching it, you're not drinking it, you're not buying it, you're trying your best, but it's still there, it's still in your face, and you get desensitized to it. So I think that's what's meant by that particular hadith, if I got it right. So to put yourself in an environment where you have the masajid, you have Muslims around you, like here in Kuwait. Let me take it to Indonesia. My sister came and visited us in Indonesia once. And so Indonesians are, in comparison to like myself, like maybe a little bit shorter on average. Okay. So I took my sister to a local supermarket. I think it was Carrefour or something. And my sister got lost. She couldn't find us. So she was looking for my wife. And she said, all I could see was a sea of people with hijabs on that looked exactly the same. I couldn't see I couldn't figure out where your wife was. And so that's what I'm saying. Everyone wears the hijab over there. Most people, some people don't. It's not a problem, but it's a very much an Islamic environment. And that's just, if you want to be a Muslim, you want to go bring your children up in a Muslim environment, Islamic environment, that's a better place to do it than it is, I guess, in somewhere where there's pop concerts and alcohol and stuff like that. I mean,
or worse,
if you want to do that, let them do it. But I'm not saying just that's my choice. That's all.
In the free West, where we believe in liberty and equality for all, I'm thinking particularly of France. Muslim women are not allowed to dress Islamically in many contexts. Students at universities, if you're a police person, if you work in education, if you work for the government, and if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, you can't dress Islamically with just a simple hijab is actually illegal. And this is particularly shocking in a country that prides itself in its freedom and liberty, to deny basic human rights. But that's just my view. I live in France partly as well. So, there are many good. I should say, actually, there's a lot of negativity about France, and much of it is justified. But there's some very good things about France as well. Not least, well, I'm not going to go there, but there are many fine things about France as well. So it's not all bad. Most places
I'm quite fond of France myself in terms of the countryside, and I know many French people who are extraordinarily pleasant to be around and very respectful. So I think may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help our brothers and sisters in France that are suffering any sort of oppression. I really do think that limiting of free it's a limiting of freedom of expression. It's a form of oppression, Paul, in my personal opinion. That's just
it is absolutely. So yes, but there is much good as well as bad, perhaps in all countries. Not
absolutely,
just
yes, absolutely, yeah.
Nowhere's perfect, but
actually that dovetails quite nicely. Maybe I know it's tough. We all face challenges in our lives, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, if I'm not mistaken, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah won't test you, beyond the limits, that you're able to bear. I would say the Arabic, but I'm scared I'd get it wrong. So, maybe if you're in
certain Arabic, could you speak Arabic? Sorry,
I can get by in Arabic. I'm okay. My Indonesian's better than my Arabic.
I was just going to say you speak Indonesian. That was the point, and as well as Arabic, and you speak passable English as well. I've noticed.
Yeah, my English is it's coming along.
You can string a sentence together. I've noticed.
I can just about get by in London. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, as I said, it dovetails quite nicely because maybe Muslims in France, again, it takes a lot of planning. It's not easy, but maybe consider, making hijrah because, in that kind of environment, it's almost as if the environment's telling you it doesn't want you there. It's really must be really tough. I mean,
yes, it is saying that it makes you feel very unwelcome, and it goes. I mean, a country, this is my view, a country has a right to, people have a right to say what they want, but to then state to the world that we believe in liberty and freedom and lecture other countries about this, it really sticks in the gall when you are at the very same moment severely restricting the rights of the Muslims in your own country. It just strikes me as, well, the word hypocrisy is often used, but I can't think of a better word. It is hypocritical, and it's very obvious, and that's the shame, because France has, as I say, many noble things about it, and it really could do better than it is. But I don't want to carry on about France. But,
no, it's fun. Like I said, France. I've had some amazing experiences in France, and they have some absolutely beautiful countryside out there. And let's not go to the cheeses, man. I mean, wow.
Oh, the
cheese and the baguettes and the coffee. Oh.
I get, when I'm there, I get fresh baguettes every day. There's none of this. We have this thing, this abomination in England. It's called sliced bread, where you get this plastic bag and it's already sliced up for you by Tesco's or whatever it is. I mean, the French must look and think we're uncivilized, and they have a point.
They must. Mind you, Paul, don't knock a nice bit of white toast with Marmite. I don't know if you're a Marmite guy, but
I'm not actually. No, I'm sorry. We have to terminate this interview now. If you support Marmite, it's not acceptable. No, but in France, you
marmalade.
Every village has the boulangerie, and you get your baguette and
yes.
your flute. I prefer the flute, and fantastic. And we don't really have that in England, but
no, it's like to sit outside on a nice cobbled street corner in kind of rustic France with a cup of coffee and a croissant.
Yeah,
there's something to be said about that. Anyway, sorry.
I've done that many times, and that's why I still do it now. So what are we talking about? Anyway, getting back to Indonesia. So this is what matters. So it's a vast country with an incredible history, and we, meaning the Europeans, unfortunately have occupied that country in the past, and there have been military efforts to retain the grip on that country, and there was a war, a struggle for independence, which they achieved some time ago in the 20th century. I forget the exact year, 1946 or something. I forget when it was. Not that I remember, but I've read about it. Well,
the 17th of August is what they call Hari Kemerdekaan. It's the day of freedom. So all the Indonesian viewers, I apologize for I can't remember the year, but I know it was the 17th of August because they call it 17. 17 is 17. So like right. the day of the 17th of August every year is like when you see the Indonesian flags in front of everyone's house, and people remembering when they got the freedom from the. Because you have to remember 300. It was over 300. I think it was almost 400 years that they were subjugated by the Dutch. It was a long time.
The thing is, now we think of the Dutch as so tolerant and inclusive, and would never oppress anyone, and yet they ruled millions of people in the Far East for centuries, and military force, and wouldn't give it up either.
No, I mean I've spoken at length with my mother-in-law and her mother as well, and my grandmother-in-law. May Allah have mercy on both of them. They both recently passed away, which is a real loss because they had some amazing stories about that. Especially my wife's grandmother. She used to tell us stories about even when the Japanese were in Indonesia, and she remembers learning Dutch and being able speaking Dutch. And if you go up to Bandung in the west, you can still see a lot of the the effects of the architecture of the Dutch. There's a lot of the old Dutch buildings still there. So yeah, it had hundreds of years, Paul. It was and they would educate only the what they would call the bangsawan, the aristocrats. So the people that weren't from the aristocracy, they would mostly just have to make do either without an education or a very poor education. So imagine hundreds and hundreds of years of going through that, generations and generations. So what we're seeing now is a country that's still kind of recovering from that.
Really?
And yet, I think they got to the point, such a gentle, kind people got to a point where they just couldn't take it anymore. Eventually overthrew and the Dutch went out. But again, I know a lot of Dutch people, and the Dutch are very pleasant people in my opinion. And I've had this discussion with the Dutch as well, with Dutch friends as well, who've told me, we used to have statues of, like there was a guy called Van den Bosch, and he was responsible for in some of the townships, the towns in Indonesia, what this guy would do is he'd go to the local town leaders and he'd say, right, you have to grow crops like coffee and spices for export. And whatever land is left, you can grow for your own food. So farmers would just starve to death growing crops for export to the Netherlands. Again, nothing against the Netherlands. I'm just saying this is history. This is what happened. So, that generation of the Dutch, there was no Twitter, there was no YouTube. They didn't really know. They were getting propaganda from the Dutch government telling them, we've got all this money coming in from the Dutch East Indies and everything's great and it's brilliant. And of course, they didn't tell them that they were starving farmers to death in Indonesia. And of course, this guy Van den Bosch was a hero. But when the Indonesians being taught about Van den Bosch in school, I mean, this guy was a criminal. And the later Dutch generations would see him as someone that went over and oppressed people. So it's really interesting to read about the history. And again, I'm just talking about this objectively. I haven't got anything against anybody. I'm just, talking about history. If I get anything wrong, I'm happy to be corrected.
No, facts are facts, and it's important to remember them, actually. But particularly when we in the West look at the Muslim world and as if it's just the other. And in fact, we have been, we meaning Europeans particularly, have been very much involved in their history, their development, full on economically, militarily for centuries.
Yes.
I mean, we all know, the French occupied, Egypt and Algeria, and the British did too. But the Dutch also, occupied the largest Muslim country on earth now for centuries. Remarkable.
Yeah, no, I mean, the British did some really horrific things in India as well to Muslims. Like there was, there's, for example, Muslim soldiers that wouldn't refuse to fight against other Muslims. They would just be shot. They'd just be put against the wall and shot for, what was the word? What's that word that they used to use if someone refused to obey their captain? Mutiny or court-martialing or something like that. Yeah, but I mean, some pretty nasty dark times, and it wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
okay.
so Indonesia is if you haven't visited, Paul, I mean, you need to put that on your bucket list. I'm telling you, it's like Bali. When the first time I went to Bali, for example, I mean, Bali is an entirely Hindu. Most of the Indonesian people there are Hindus, practicing Hindus. Like you're literally every single day they have what they call upacara. It's like a ceremony for something or another. Like there'll be people walking down the street in multicolored garments with fruit, for offerings to the local temple. The road will be closed off, and people are just. It's just that's the way life is out there. People are just chill. They're just cool. Bali, of course, has suffered hugely in the recent 2 years with the COVID issue, because the island runs on tourism. Exactly. So I understand a lot of beautiful place, Paul. I mean, you can drive from one end of the island to the other in a day. The beaches are amazing. The scenery is amazing. The people are very friendly. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say. Beautiful place.
Just on that point about other religions, there's quite a few non-Muslims in Indonesia. Christians, obviously, is what 10% or something of the population are.
I don't know the percentages, but you have obviously majority Islam, but there's a lot of Christians there, Catholics there, Buddhists, Hindus, and so on and so forth.
And do they have freedom to worship? I mean, sorry to label the old point here, but they have freedom to worship. And Hindus, you mentioned Hindus obviously exist. And
in Bali, I mean, Bali is ostensibly a Hindu island. It's right. I mean, there are mosques there where people, can go and pray. But you'll find Indonesia is a very tolerant place. And to be honest with you, I've been a Muslim 22 years now, and when you see stuff on the news about terrorism and the sort of people that carry out terrorism, I've heard the rhetoric of certain polemists on the radio and on the television, Islamic people, that I would call extremist. I'm just shaking my head. I don't know where these people must be in a severe minority, because I've never come across those kind of people. The people I've come across are the Indonesian sort of people, very polite, kind. Before I was a Muslim in Indonesia, I didn't even know that people were going to the mosque. That's how they just went about their business. I'd hear the call to prayer, but I didn't really know what it was. I didn't ask. Nobody came and told me about it, forced it down my throat. just everyone's living together and having a good time. It's just it's good.
Yeah, I think I've had the privilege of speaking to Rabbi Tovi Singer. He's a Jewish rabbi, obviously, and he was, I think, an official status almost as the chaplain to Indonesia as a rabbi for years. He has a huge following, an appreciative audience of viewers from Indonesia and elsewhere in the world, of course. So, the way he speaks of Indonesia as a Jewish thinker, leader, is very, very positive as well. So
obviously, with with the politics with Israel, I think that that does cause, especially with Judaism, a little bit of friction, because people don't understand the difference typically between like practicing Jews and Zionists. So what I would call maybe political Judaism and actual Judaism. So people. There
is a difference, obviously, as you.
There is a significant difference, and I don't think because people always see Israel in the news, so that that obviously makes a problem for the practicing Jews that are not into that kind of stuff, if you like. So, but that's another subject.
Yeah, another subject, which is definitely another subject. Okay, well, perhaps we can draw to a close now. I really appreciate what you said, particularly about your experiences in Indonesia and the history of that country, vis-a-vis the European involvement, the tragic European involvement, and how Indonesia is coming out of that strongly now. But is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion, just to educate us or share information and knowledge about your experience in Indonesia?
There's so many things I could say. I mean, what I try to do is, on my YouTube channel and things like that, is I try to, address issues that will be beneficial to people and share things that will be beneficial to people. I try to make content in Bahasa Indonesia as well. But over here in the Middle East, it doesn't seem to have, especially with things like TikTok, the reach just doesn't seem to go out to places like Indonesia. But I'm always open to, like I said before, if someone wants to talk about hijrah, I can try my best to address based on my experiences. And I just, like you said at the start, Paul, people need to remember, especially non-Muslims, that Islam is not a religion for Arabs. It's a religion for the whole of mankind. I think Indonesia is a tremendous example of, tolerance. I'm not saying moderate. I'm saying tolerance. Because you see people like I said on the last interview, go to Jakarta. You see Masjid Istiqlal, which is the biggest mosque in Indonesia. I think it's the biggest mosque. It was at the time. They're building mosques all the time. Opposite Masjid Istiqlal is the Cathedral of Jakarta.
Is that Roman Catholic or the cathedral?
I'm not too sure. The viewers will, I'm sure, tell us in the comments.
Nevertheless, it is there anyway. That's the point. And
I've never found anything other than tolerance, extreme respect, and people in Indonesia are often not that. Most of the people are not super rich. There are obviously very well-to-do people out there, and it's just like any other place. But because the population is so large, there's a lot of people there that are struggling. But if you knock on their door and they'll offer you everything they've got in their house, and you're the guest. And again, this is something from Islamic basis. This is one of the famous hadith, which is in Imam an-Nawawi's 40 hadith, that if you believe in Allah and the last day, then be good to your neighbor, be good to your guest. Actually, I've got it right here. I can look it up.
Please do.
Can you edit that bit out?
Not at all. Staying in, mate. Staying in.
Staying in? I think it's number 14. I'd love to read this hadith because it's a beautiful hadith. Yes. Let him who believes in Allah and the last day either speak good or keep silent, and let him who believes in Allah and the last day be generous to his neighbor, and let him who believes in Allah and the last day be generous to his guest. Narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. Wow! So the Indonesians embody this hadith.
That's an amazing hadith, actually. I didn't know it was. I've heard the shorter version. of that. But
this book is very much worth getting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's the perfect note to conclude our discussion, actually, that hadith, I must say. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. And I do encourage viewers to sign up to you on TikTok, where you have a huge following, and also on YouTube, and obviously on Instagram and Twitter as well, because you create content virtually every day, I think, it seems to me.
I try my best, but it's sometimes I run out of inspiration, or I'm just busy at work. But I try to keep it beneficial rather than
yes.
Oh, today I'm having toast and not Marmite for sure. But
no, good for you. No, I've only ever known your content to be extremely relevant and Islamic. Actually, it's not.
It's very good of you. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. Until next time.